Hey, everybody. I'm so glad that you're back with me on the Your Project Shepherd podcast. Today, I wanted to pose a question. Are builders superheroes? I know all my builders out there are throwing their hands up and shouting, yes, from the rooftops. And while I, of course, agree, what I want to discuss today is one particular skill set that makes us seem like we might be superheroes. And that is the three types of vision that we as builders have to be successful. And I would call these like superhuman vision. I'll kind of run down these three types real quick and then we'll get into them. First one is 3D vision, and that's the ability to turn flat lines into reality, to be able to visualize that. The second one is X-ray vision. Think about Superman. A way to see what lurks behind the surface and understand how something's put together. And the last one is long-range vision. Think about binoculars or a telescope or a crystal ball. It's a way to see a long way out what's going to happen or what might happen. So developing these three skills with your project management team, your subcontractors, with everybody is going to help you as a builder take things to the next level. And so let's start with that 3D vision. This is the one that we're most likely going to encounter early in the project, and the one that I think a lot of people struggle with their clients. You know, the ability to interpret lines on a flat page is a skill that we have to develop over time. I know when I first started out, and remember, I did not come from a construction background. I did not go to school for construction. I hated reading blueprints. It was a totally alien language to me. I had to work really hard to understand what's happening on those pages. So now think about how your clients feel. These people are probably going to see a set of plans once or twice in their whole life. And they cannot be expected to just get that and understand it by looking at a 2D set of blueprints or plans, right? So we as builders, contractors, we have to be able to communicate to them what they're going to be getting. I've talked before on some previous episodes about giving a very specific scope of work. So that's a part of it. So in addition to our 2D plans, we also need to have a list of this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to happen, this is what's included. Because there's a lot of things that go into a build that aren't on that sheet of paper. That's all these layers that have to happen, and we have to define what those layers are and help them understand that. Now, 3D tools like SketchUp and in the design world, a Revit, a Chief Architect, these tools that have that 3D capability, those things have really helped us by giving us the ability to create computer renderings and show our clients what they're going to be getting. But even those tools have their limitations. Things are not always going to be on there just like it is in reality. So sometimes making a mock-up for your customers is a solution if it's something small, or if it's something that you can create a partial wall, kind of a cut wall, and so they can see those layers, or doing a mock-up so they can understand how something's going to look. And that's definitely an important tool during certain phases of the project. We like to do a mock-up wall for exteriors, right? So we've got our brick, siding, stucco, trim, all those things. So they can see what those materials look like together. They can see the paint colors. They can understand how those materials relate to each other, but also like the depths and how things are set into the wall. So making mock-ups can be a great tool. Same thing goes to trim. So doing a trim mock-up or a cabinet mock-up, using just a couple scraps to put something together so they can understand what that's going to look like before you spend the money to buy all that material, get it on site, start doing it, and that's not what we wanted. We didn't think it was going to look like that, right? So doing a small mock-up helps them visualize that because, again, hopefully we as builders have that 3D vision to where we're seeing it, but we have to be able to translate that to our clients and to our team and to our subcontractors so that everyone's on the same page about what's going to be happening and what that final product is going to look like. So early on, during design planning, I, as either the salesperson, the estimator, or the designer, I have to have that 3D vision initially but then I have to be able to communicate that vision to everyone else. One more example on that. I've gotten some specs before on doing some really like complicated compound trim details. And a compound trim detail, if you're not familiar with the term, is when you just kind of have layers of trim that build up and create kind of the final look. You see it a lot with crown moldings where you'll have like a 2 or 3 piece crown molding that kind of gives you that final look. Or maybe it's a complicated wall paneling detail, like in a dining room or something like that. And, so when you start building things up and creating, adding thickness to a wall, that can have a domino effect. And now it affects how that window looks or how that door frame looks or how that interacts with other surfaces. So if you have this really complicated, compound trim detail and you're not paying attention, again, you might buy 5 or 6 different materials. And some of those things might be like stain grade or it's like a special order knife from the millwork company, and those things cost a lot of money. And you get all that there and you start putting it together and you're like, oh, wait, no, this doesn't work. I can't make it work in this room. So, hey, I just wasted $5,000 on trim that can't be returned to a special order. So you kind of have to have this actually a combo, right, in the situation of this 3D vision of how things go together, but also the long-term vision to anticipate problems before they cost you money. And so that might mean on the long-term side, when you're framing it, you're thinking about, okay, how I'm framing this and the dimension on this going to allow me to do that trim detail on down the road? So 3D vision is our first thing. A second thing I mentioned is X-ray vision. Here's our Superman vision, or we're putting on our X-ray goggles that we bought from the back of the cereal box for all you old people who remember buying things from cereal boxes, which I'm sure they don't do anymore. If you found value in this episode of Your Project Shepherd podcast, please consider leaving us a review and sharing it with your friends. That helps us expand our reach and bring this content to more people. Thanks for being here. So X-ray vision, it's a skill that's really important, especially for remodelers, but it can also apply to new home builders. An experienced remodeler is going to have a great concept of this, but it's definitely a skill that you build over time. I've remodeled houses from the 1920s. 20s is about the oldest house we're going to get here in Houston that I have to deal with. Some parts of the country obviously have some older housing stock they're dealing with. But, so we've remodeled for houses from the, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, on and on. And each of those areas are going to have their typical construction methods and assemblies that they would use during that time period. So, with my experience, I know, generally speaking, what to expect when I'm remodeling a house from that particular era. But you also have to look for clues that tell you if that assembly has been modified over time. Has that room already had a remodel? Has this house already had an addition put on it? So look for those clues to tell you if something's been changed. So we need to be able to look at a wall and use our 3D vision to understand the layers that are involved and visualize how that wall is constructed from the outside in. So look at that wall and say, okay, what's the cladding, whether that's brick or stone or siding or stucco or whatever, right? What's the WRB, the weather resistant barrier behind that? If it's an old house, there might not be a WRB. There might be tar paper. If it's newer, it might be a synthetic, like a Tyvek, a house wrap. But so what's the WRB? What's the sheathing behind that? Is it shiplap? Is it plywood? Studs, stud thickness, insulation, wiring, plumbing, drywall, trim. What are all those layers that go into that wall assembly, right? And it's understanding how those layers relate to each other. And what I mean is that we need to be able to understand how that wall as an assembly and how the components of that assembly work together to do things like manage temperature, manage water vapor, manage moisture, like bulk water intrusion, maybe keep out things like insects and pests and dust and things like that. All those things so that when we encounter a problem and we're troubleshooting something, we can look for those clues to help us understand how to solve that problem hopefully without disassembling that wall completely. So we have to use that X-ray vision to kind of visualize the layers in that wall, understand how they're interacting with each other and how those layers are interacting with the outside world as well, to manage those things that I just mentioned. So on my consulting business, Toner and I deal with this all the time. We have to look at a wall and, so we'll see mold on the inside of the wall, or we'll see water intrusion. And so we have to kind of think through this and think about, okay, what's the age of the home? What era was it built in? What is likely that wall assembly, without tearing it apart, because we don't want to do demolition. We want to use destructive demolition as a last resort. So we're going to use our 3D vision as our first resort. Think about, okay, what could be causing that mold to be present? And if we understand those layers and understand how, water vapor, for example, moves through that assembly, we can use some clues to determine, the cause of that mold or, moisture that we're seeing inside that wall. So really important. Also, when we're remodeling, we need to understand how we're going to connect to that assembly, or better yet, what problems we might encounter when we try to connect to that assembly so that we can budget for them. Big experience between an experienced remodeler and an inexperienced one is anticipating what you might find, and also what language that you're putting in your contract to mitigate that risk. On my consulting side, I get to review a lot of contracts, and I get to see kind of the mistakes that people make when they're putting their language in about their project that they're doing, their scope that they're doing, rather. And a smart remodeler, a smart builder is going to, not only understand what they might encounter, but they're going to put language in there, again, to mitigate that risk. So I know if I'm doing a 1920s home that's never been remodeled, I'm probably going to encounter shiplap behind the plaster walls, probably zero insulation, probably going to have some knob and tube wiring in place. So I need a budget for that, and I need a plan for how I'm going to deal with that. So I'm either budgeting that, hey, we're just going to take this off, we're going to remove all the knob and tube, go back, rewire it properly to current code. We need to know that we're going to have to cut some holes in that shiplap. We're going to have to patch the shiplap, because that shiplap is probably a structural component of the house. Shiplap in the 1920s was not just put in place as something to apply plaster to, although that's part of the reason. The shiplap, based on the way the house was framed with balloon framing, is giving structural rigidity, if I can talk, to that house. So you can't just go into a 1920s house, rip all the shiplap off, because that's going to compromise your structural integrity. So it's understanding all that. It's having a plan on how you're going to deal with it. Likewise, on a 1970s house, if I see a real thin tile checkerboard floor, I know that there's a pretty high chance that's going to have asbestos in it. So I've got to be thinking, hey, what's my mitigation plan for dealing with asbestos? Because we don't want to hit our homeowners unnecessarily with a change order for something that we as an experienced builder could have anticipated. And we also don't want to cost ourselves money. We don't want to put ourselves in a position to where we're having a conflict with our homeowner because, we should have anticipated that. We didn't budget for it, so now there's a conflict. So by putting some language in your contract, you're saying, I'm saying, hey, Mr. Homeowner, I know in my experience, I might encounter some asbestos tile in this house. We're going to do some testing. We're going to see if it has that, hopefully before we go under contract. And we have a plan for how we're going to deal with that. Or we know that we're going to find knob and tube wiring in this wall. It's a 1920s house. It's never been remodeled. So I'm going to go ahead and budget for that. And I'm not going to wait until we tear the wall open and, oh my God, there's a knob and tube wiring. Now we have to deal with it. That's a $10,000 change order. No one likes that. So let's be the expert. Let's be proactive. Let's get the language in our contract to go ahead and deal with that. So X-ray vision, it also applies, on the new home side to something like when we're doing trim out at the end of a project. And this should seem obvious. Hopefully we're planning for this, but things like installing towel bars, toilet paper holders, hanging mirrors, maybe helping the customer hang large artwork on the wall. Hopefully we're putting blocking in place for that, but it's also having the X-ray vision to remember this is that wall assembly. This is what's in place to plan for that. So this is where it's supposed to go, right? So we're not having to use crappy little drywall anchors to where 2 years down the road, the homeowner's towel bar is ripping out of the wall because we didn't adequately plan for that scenario, for that towel bar being there. So it's planning for it, but it's also when we're actually going to do the trim out, we know where that thing is going. Also, installing wallpaper. Again, this is a great example. Kind of goes back to the X-ray vision also, but it's also understanding our wall assembly and understanding how vapor is moving through that wall. So we can't go installing a wallpaper on an exterior wall where we haven't kind of planned for that, because we still have to manage that vapor drive through the wall. So we have to go ahead and be thinking through all that. We have to have the X-ray vision when we're doing trim out to say, is this assembly right for what I'm putting on it? Are we prepped for it? Is it ready to go? Is there adequate support? Do we have the right kind of boxes in place? Yada, 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 things like that. So a fantastic tool for this, I'll go ahead and put a plug in for Multivista. We had them on a podcast a few months ago, last year, I think. Multivista is a great service. It's a photo documentation service. We use them to come out and take pictures of all of our projects during construction. They have a great software that allows them to put their camera in the exact same location every single time. They're taking the same set of photos from the same location. Those photos are actually linked to their plans. And then we have a portal for that to view it. So I could open my iPad here. I can pull up the plans for the house. I can tap on a location in bedroom 2, northwest wall, click that spot. Boom, there's every photo that was taken from that spot of that wall all the way through construction. So I can see that spot from foundation, framing, MEP rough ends, drywall, trim, paint, being furnished, right? I can see all those layers and understand what's inside that wall. So Multivista is actually giving me my X-ray vision for that built environment. So a great plug for them. We use them again on all our projects. I think everybody should check into using them. So now it's time to pull out our last tool. We're going to pull out our binoculars here. We're going to talk about our long-range vision. And like I said, we might want to think about this also as a crystal ball, because we don't always know what's going to happen. So there's a few components to this. The main one I want to focus on is understanding how what we're doing today is going to affect something that's going to take place on down the road in the project. And this can be hard, especially on jobs that might take 12, 18, 24 months. I know some of you out there are doing remodel projects. Maybe, they're 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, something like that. And we do some of those too, but we're also doing projects that are a year and a half, 2 year long projects. So we really have to have this kind of crystal ball, this binocular, this long range vision mentality when we're doing the work. So we can have dozens of trades working on the same space in the same house. And it's important to think through these tiny details that happen at one phase that are going to affect everything else that happens on down the road. So you think all the way to the very beginning, foundation, concrete placement, right? It's making sure that, you're thinking through. Actually, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we had bright architecture on here. We're talking about modern houses, and we're talking about concrete placement and exposed aggregate and concrete finishes, which goes back to our Duncan Miller episode about concrete. Anyway, I'm kind of thinking back through all the topics that I've had on this. When we pour that concrete, we have to know, what's our finished floor? Is it the concrete? Is it going to be tile? Is it going to be hardwood? Do we need to drop that concrete for somebody else so that finished floor is going to flush out at a certain level? It's thinking through all those details and using our long-range vision to understand that what we're placing in January of 2024 is going to affect that floor being installed in December of 2025, and so that we don't get all the way to December 25 and scratch our heads and think, oh man, how are we going to make this floor turn out the way it was intended to? So, all the way back to foundation placement, concrete, framing. See this all the time. The framing doesn't get punch listed, and we've got studs that are bowed. We've got walls that are not plumb and level, and that can really bite you in the butt 6 months later when you're hanging drywall or when you're painting and finishing, and now you have all this light coming in through this big glazing assembly that's just blasting and on this wall and just highlighting your mistakes. So it's really being able to use that long-term vision and think through, okay, the finished product that I want looks like this. How do I get there? What do I need to do now to get that finished product later on? And so this obviously also applies to our subcontractors. Like, we have to help them think about how what their task is doing is going to affect all the people that come after them. Because that one sub may only be there for a day or a week, and then what they're doing is going to affect somebody else 12 months later. That concrete guy, he's going to be there, a week. He'll be setting his form, setting his rebar, pouring his concrete. He's gone, never to be seen again on that particular job site, right? But we have to not only manage him, but even coach him and talk to him and say, hey, Joe, how does your concrete that you're setting today affect somebody else? And help him realize how important his role is. This is really key to coaching people. It's helping them understand, because it empowers them. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel that their job is important when they think about, oh man, I never really considered that, kind of this task that I'm doing really is important. This is maybe a $10,000 task on $1 million project, but this little thing that I'm doing really is essential to seeing the vision come to life. So it's kind of a way of empowering your subcontractors, your tradespeople, making them feel like they're a part of something greater. So, in the vein of thinking, getting people to think about how they're affecting others, is your trim carpenter, when he's putting up your crown molding, your door casing, is he going rapid fire on the nail gun and just nail holes everywhere? Or is he thinking about, okay, I got to be more intentional about only putting the nails where I need them, not pulling that trigger 50 times, because now the painter is going to have to fix that stuff. And that's going to affect the final product. So again, it kind of goes back to helping this guy understand that this one thing that I'm doing really affects the final product. Is it making the next guy's life easier? Is it making that relationship good? I've been on job sites where the painter hates the trim carpenter. He's like, oh man, that guy sucks. Every time he's in this house, he's just blasting his nail gun. He's putting it right on the edge. He's causing splits, and now I got to fix all his stuff, right? And then I've had painters say, oh man, that carpenter's amazing. He only used the number of nails that he needed to use. He glued his joints. He didn't put his nails too close to the edge. He was very intentional about how he did his work. I love that carpenter. So that type of thing helps build, synergy between your subcontractors, keeps their relationships better, which in turn is going to give you a much better product. We also see this a lot with painters, painters with masking stuff. I've seen painters that go in, just put some cabinet doors on the floor, put some trim on the floor, start shooting it with paint, not even thinking about what the paint's getting on around them. Well, sometimes having paint on your concrete or on your subfloor can cause problems for the next contractor, for the flooring contractor, when it comes to what he's putting down, or his adhesive is not going to be affected by all that goopy paint overspray that's on the floor. So yeah, it's really helping your trades to understand what's going to be happening. And so also on this topic, I like to think about who else might be coming down the road as far as future projects go. So we know that a kitchen, a bathroom, those are likely the first things that are going to get remodeled on a house by either the current homeowner when they get tired of looking at what they picked out today, or a future homeowner when they buy the house. And this might be kind of overthinking a little bit, but this is the mentality that I like to take. So if we know that kitchen, that bathroom is maybe going to get remodeled 10 years from now, what can I do today as the original builder, or as the person remodeling this house today, to make the next guy's life easier, and then in turn make the customer's life easier, less costly, right? Am I doing some kind of like wacky, non-standard installation, some kind of weird thing, some kind of weird way of putting things together? Or is what I'm doing today going to make sense to the next guy? Is the next guy going to be able to use his 3D vision to look at this and understand how it goes together? Is he going to be able to think, well, back in 2025, the builders were doing things this way. This was the standard method, so this is what I should expect. And then I'm not using some kind of crazy technique that no one's using that's going to make him struggle in the future. So, I love coming on job sites, doing demo, taking some drywall down, and seeing the previous guy's notes even penciled on the backside of a wall or written on the studs, like notes and things. I don't know if those people had that intention when they were doing that, or if that's just their notes. But I love seeing that. I love that they even maybe unintentionally made my life easier by doing things a certain way. So maybe I like to pass it on, do that for the next guy that's coming on down the road. Kind of going back to the multi-vista thing, this is another reason they're great, is you're creating that permanent record that can be passed on. Well, assuming that people are still using JPEGs 10 years from now, assuming that people still have the ability to read a USB drive, I guess. But, we're creating this permanent record of photos and plans and documentation that we can give to the homeowner. They can save it in a file. They can have a thumb drive, burn the CD-ROM, whatever, pass that on to the next person so that they have the record. And anyone in the future, they can open that multi-vista file. They can view that photo progression, understand how that wall is put together, and then they are set up for success in the future. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you got something out of this. I know that I really enjoyed thinking through this in preparation for it for you. And to all my superhero builders out there, go fly off, use those 3 special powers that you have, your 3D vision, your X-ray vision, and your long-range vision, your crystal ball. So use that to go give your clients a better experience and your team a better experience. Thanks for coming today. See you later.